People always say it rains in Edinburgh, but the day my father was buried, the sky held its breath. No rain, no wind, just a heavy, watchful stillness that pressed against my ribs like an unspoken warning. The funeral was small, just a cluster of academics, some aging colleagues from the university, a few former students who looked like they'd shown up out of guilt rather than grief. No friends, no family, only me. I stood at the edge of the grave, my hands buried deep in the pockets of my coat, staring at the mahogany coffin as it was lowered into the ground. The soil was dark, damp, like ink soaking into parchment. "May Doctor, Malcolm MacLeod rest in peace," the minister said softly. Rest. That was rich. My father never rested, not in life, and certainly not in how he haunted others. He was a man of precision, of rules, of silence, the kind who carved order into everything, even people, especially people. The headstone was already in place. Of course it was. He'd probably written the inscription himself. Dr. Malcolm A. MacLeod, 1949 to 2025 scholar, father, visionary, visionary. I wanted to laugh or scream, but I did neither. I simply stared until the others began to drift away, their shoes crunching over the gravel path, their condolences vague and whispered. One of them, a tall woman with red lipstick too bold for the occasion, touched my arm. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said. I nodded. She walked away. They always assumed I was grieving. They never knew I'd been grieving for years, long before the heart attack, long before the coffin. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I walked. Past the George Square Library, past buildings soaked in centuries of soot and intellect, past the bookshop where I'd once worked Saturdays, behind my father's back. I lived above it now, a tiny apartment with more shelves than furniture. My father hated the place, said it was cluttered with sentiment, which was probably why I chose it. Inside, the air smelled like paper and peppermint tea. The condolence book still sat untouched on my desk. A few names, scribbled sympathies, nothing meaningful. Except one, written in fine looping script. "I'm sorry. He should have told you the truth." I stared at it, my fingers tracing the ink. I.F. The initials meant nothing, and somehow, everything. The next morning, I sat in the office of Graham Wexley, my father's lawyer, and, for all I knew, his only confidant. The kind of man who wore cufflinks with monograms and used phrases like "in confidence" far too often. "Thank you for coming, Rowan," he said, motioning for me to sit. I did. His office smelled like polished wood and old decisions. "I thought the will had already been read," I said. "It has." He reached into his drawer and slid a sealed envelope across the desk. Brown paper, black wax, the MacLeod crest pressed deep into the seal, a griffin clutching a laurel. "This was found hidden in your father's private library," Wexley explained. "Inside a hollowed-out volume of Paradise Lost. It appears to predate the official will. And it names a second heir." I blinked. "What?" "A woman named Isla Fraser." He watched me carefully, waiting for the name to land. "I don't know her." "She may have been a student, or more." Something in his voice cracked, a flicker of unease. "Is it legitimate?" I asked. "We don't know yet," he admitted. "But if it is, she stands to inherit a considerable share of your father's estate." I stared at the envelope. It wasn't addressed to me. Just a simple phrase, written in my father's unmistakable script. "For the moment after I'm gone." "May I?" I asked. He nodded. I broke the seal. Inside was a letter, one paragraph. "Rowan, if you're reading this, the last wall has fallen. I made mistakes, big ones. There is someone you must find. Isla. She's the missing chapter. Trust no one blindly, not even those closest to you. M." I read it twice. "Do you know who she is?" I asked quietly. Wexley shook his head, too quickly. She may be a fabrication. You know how your father was, prone to drama at times. I stood. Or maybe he was finally ready to tell the truth. I didn't wait for a response. That night, I returned to my father's study. The house smelled like varnish and cold memories. The bookshelves lined every wall, towering, oppressive, every spine perfectly aligned, alphabetized, categorized. He'd once said that knowledge was only useful when contained. I didn't want to contain anything anymore. I searched through drawer after drawer, box after box, and then I found it, tucked behind a faded photograph of him at Oxford, a worn leather notebook. Inside, passages in his handwriting, marginalia, names, and one, scrawled in red ink, Leith Walk 139, Ela, don't forget. I closed the book. The city outside was cloaked in fog and quiet, but I felt something stirring under the silence, an unraveling. I slipped the notebook into my coat, locked the house behind me, and walked into the night. Leith Walk was a part of Edinburgh I rarely visited, too chaotic, too loud, too alive for someone who'd grown up in the tomb-like silence of academia. But tonight, the street felt different, quieter, suspended, as if holding its breath. I found number 139, sandwiched between a shuttered record store and a grimy kebab shop. A brass plaque hung on the door, catching what little light the street lamp offered. Ela Fraser, book restoration and binding. I stood there for a long moment. My hand hovered over the knocker. What exactly was I about to find? A stranger? A sister? A lie? I knocked. There was a pause, then footsteps. The door opened. A woman stood before me, maybe a few years younger than I was. She had short dark hair pulled back by a pencil, ink on her fingers, and the kind of stillness in her posture that told me she was used to waiting. Her eyes, sharp, dark, unflinching, met mine. "You're Rowan MacLeod," she said, not asked, said. My voice caught. "You're Isla?" She nodded once. "Come in, I've been expecting you." The workshop smelled like glue and dust and old parchment. Shelves of damaged volumes and delicate tools lined the walls. A kettle hissed on a hot plate in the corner. I stood awkwardly while she cleared a stack of antique books from a worn leather chair. "Tea?" she asked. "No, thank you." I sat. My knees didn't quite bend right. Everything about this moment felt too fragile to disturb. She sat across from me and looked at me like she was trying to read between lines that hadn't yet been written. "I got a letter," I said finally. "From him." Her expression didn't change. "I did too." I reached into my bag and handed her the folded page. My father's final words. She read it in silence. Her lips didn't move, but I could feel her tension like a wire stretching across the room. "He knew," she murmured. "He always knew." "Knew what?" I asked. "That we existed. That we weren't just theories." I frowned. "You think he thought of us as theories?" Isla gave a short, humorless laugh. "I think he thought of most people that way. Prototypes, variables. He wrote to me once, years ago. Unsigned, unmailed. I found the letter tucked inside an old book. It said I was a product of unintended consequence, intellectually promising. Like I was a footnote. My stomach turned. I didn't even know you existed." "I'm not surprised." He was careful. She stood and crossed the room, opening a drawer in a tall cabinet. She pulled out a leather-bound journal, older, heavier than the others. "He sent this to me," she said, holding it like a relic. No note, no explanation, just this. She opened it. Inside were pages filled with my father's tight handwriting, peppered with dates, philosophical references, and names, and one of them jumped out at me like a slap to the face. "Graham Wexley." I pointed. "That's his lawyer. He gave me the envelope. Told me he didn't know anything about you." "He's lying," Isla said, and we need to know why. We read in silence for an hour. The journal was dense, full of reflections, cryptic entries, even paranoia. Wexley is no longer just a confidant. He's watching me. The university funds? Not clean. If it comes out, Isla will be implicated. Rowan must be protected. My throat tightened. He was covering something, I whispered. Not just for himself, Isla said. For you. Maybe for me too, but it doesn't make sense. I leaned back, my head spun. All I ever wanted was to understand him. Now he's gone, and all I have are puzzles. She looked at me carefully. He left one more. I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? There's a third will, she said. I froze. How do you know? He told me in one of his notes. It's hidden. Not in the records, not with the lawyer. Somewhere in his old office at the university. My pulse quickened. You've seen it? Remember, I tried once, late at night. But the office is locked. I didn't want to risk being caught. I stood slowly. Then we go together. She hesitated. Tonight? Yes, before someone else finds it first. She didn't argue. Instead, she reached for her coat and pulled the door shut behind us. Outside, the city was hushed under a blanket of mist. We walked side by side toward the old university halls, the air between us heavy with unanswered questions. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Some truths aren't told, they're uncovered. And we were about to dig. By the time we reached the university, the fog had thickened. It crept along the cobblestones like smoke, curling around our ankles as we made our way through the side courtyard. The old humanities building loomed ahead, gothic and grim, as if it had been waiting for us. Are you sure the back door still works? I whispered. Isla didn't answer. She stepped up to the keypad beside the service entrance and entered a sequence of numbers. The lock clicked. Of course it did. Inside, the hallway was steeped in darkness. The only sound was the faint buzz of an emergency light overhead and the soft tap of our footsteps on the worn stone floor. It felt like walking into the belly of something ancient, a library that had forgotten it once held knowledge. He kept everything, Isla whispered. Letters, drafts, notes he never published. I know. I paused, then added, he also kept people out. We stopped in front of his office door. A heavy brass nameplate read, Dr. Malcolm MacLeod, Department of Comparative Literature. The door was locked. I've got it, Isla said, pulling a thin metal tool from her bag. You carry lockpicks? She didn't look up. I restore antique boxes for a living. Locks are just puzzles. A click. The door creaked open. The air inside was stale and cold. Nothing had changed. Bookshelves lined every wall, all meticulously ordered. A Persian rug lay centered beneath the massive oak desk. Framed degrees and citations hung at precise angles. It was less an office than a shrine to control. Where would he hide something? Isla asked. I ran my hand over the spines of the books on the shelf behind the desk. Someplace no one would ever look because they'd assume he'd never hide anything at all. We split up, each scanning different corners of the room. I checked the desk drawers, nothing but neatly labeled folders and a single silver fountain pen. Isla examined the framed portraits on the wall, tapping their edges for hollow sounds. Then I saw it. A red volume, plain, unmarked, tucked among a row of black-bound texts. It didn't belong. I pulled it free. It was heavier than it should have been. Hollow. Inside, a sealed envelope. I held it up. I think we've got it. Isla crossed the room, eyes wide. She reached for the envelope. But just then, a noise broke the silence. Footsteps. Outside. Slow. Purposeful. We froze. Isla mouthed, "Someone's here." I snapped off the desk lamp. The room fell into shadow. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Then the door handle turned. We ducked behind opposite bookshelves, barely breathing. The door opened. A figure entered, silhouetted in the hallway light. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a long coat. I didn't need to see his face. I knew that posture. Graham Wexley. He walked straight to the desk, switched on the lamp, and scanned the room. He knew. He didn't call out. He didn't check the shelves. He went to the bookcase and reached for the exact spot where the red volume had been. His hand froze. Gone. He turned slowly, as if expecting someone. Then he said softly, almost to himself, "You always were predictable, Malcolm." He stood there for another long moment. Then he spoke again, this time louder. "If you're listening, Rowan, you don't understand what you're walking into. You think this is about inheritance? About secrets? But it's bigger than that." A pause. His voice dropped again. "You won't win this?" Then he left. The door clicked shut. We stayed still for another minute, just to be sure. Then Isla exhaled. He knew we'd come. He knew exactly where that will was hidden, I said. And that means he's been here before. I handed her the envelope. She cracked the seal with shaking hands. Inside was a single page, handwritten, final addendum, notarized in private, unsigned by public witness, to be used only in the event of foul play or coercion. I, Malcolm Alistair MacLeod, declare that Isla Fraser is my biological daughter. I declare that Rowan MacLeod is likewise my daughter and primary academic heir. All literary and research-related holdings shall be split equally. All financial holdings shall be reassessed based on findings held in Secure Archive File 9B at the University Library. Should my death raise questions? Seek the key. Ela knows where. Rowan knows why. We looked at each other. "A key?" I asked. Isla was pale. She sat slowly on the edge of the desk. "There's a box," she said. "Something he sent me years ago. Locked. No explanation. I thought it was junk. I never opened it." My heart raced. "Do you still have it?" She nodded. And just like that, we had a next step. We didn't speak much on the way back. The streets were nearly empty, save for the occasional taxi slicing through the fog. Isla kept her arms folded tightly around her chest, her expression unreadable. When we reached her workshop, she locked the door behind us, drew the curtains, and walked straight to the back room. I stood in silence, the weight of the envelope still burning in my coat pocket. A few minutes later, she returned, holding a small worn metal box in both hands. It was unremarkable at first glance. Steel, dented at the corners, with a tarnished clasp and a tiny lock on the front. But the way she carried it, reverent, almost reluctant, told me this wasn't just a container. It was a memory. "I've had this for 7 years, Isla said. He sent it without a note, no key. I kept it buried in a cabinet and tried to forget about it." "What changed?" I asked. She looked up at me, eyes sharp. "You." She set the box on the table between us. I bent down to examine the lock. Old, mechanical, but intact. "Have you ever tried to open it?" "Hundreds of times. I tried every birthday I could think of. His, mine. Nothing." My fingers grazed the edge. Then I remembered the journal. The line from the will. "Seek the key." Isla knows where. Rowan knows why. "Maybe it's not a date," I said. "Maybe it's a word." "What kind of word?" I thought of something my father once told me when I was 12, in a rare moment of sentiment. "Truth is the most dangerous thing you can hold in your hands. That's why I keep it between pages." I tried the word. T-R-U-T-H. There was a soft click. Isla inhaled sharply. I lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in yellowing paper and tied with a faded black ribbon, was a stack of documents. And beneath them, a flash drive. Not just any flash drive, a heavy one, military grade, protected. "This looks serious," I murmured. Isla was already unfolding the papers. At the top of the first page, Classified Communication, University Investigation Committee, 2017. I scanned the content. Embezzlement, fabricated research, misappropriated grants, a network of professors, including my father, funneling money through non-existent academic studies in exchange for favors, jobs, and silent loyalty. At the bottom, oversight, G. Wexley, legal liaison. Ela sat down, hard. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would he keep this? Why send it to me?" "Because he knew it would fall apart," I said, "and he needed someone outside the system to know the truth." I held up the flash drive. "This might be the rest of it." We plugged it into her laptop. One folder, titled Final Words. Inside, a video. My father, seated in his office, looking older, paler, not sick, but scared. If you're seeing this, then either I'm dead or I've been silenced. I didn't want it to go this far. I thought I could fix it quietly. Keep Isla safe. Keep Rowan out of it. But I was wrong. I let it grow. And now Graham Wexley controls more than I ever imagined. He knows everything about Isla, about the grants, about Helena, Isla's mother. He used it all to keep me in line. I have no illusions left. They will come for this truth eventually. But if you're watching this, it means you're already in it. So finish what I couldn't. And don't trust anyone who calls you by your father's name. The screen faded to black. Silence filled the room. "He was trying to protect us," Isla said softly. I shook my head. "He was trying to control the damage. Protecting us was secondary." She didn't argue. We stared at the laptop, both of us knowing what had to come next. "We take it public," I said. "The journal, the will, the documents, everything." "And Wexley? We go to him first." She looked at me like I was mad. "Why?" "Because if we don't give him a chance to react, he'll find another way to bury us." She leaned back. "So what? We blackmail him?" I met her gaze. "Number." "We give him a choice." She raised an eyebrow. "To do what?" I closed the lid of the laptop slowly. "To disappear. Or burn with the house he built." We didn't make an appointment. We showed up. Graham Wexley's office sat on the top floor of a sleek, glass-fronted building overlooking the edge of Edinburgh's financial district. It was a far cry from the shadowy, dust-filled world my father had lived in. But something about it felt colder, cleaner, in a way that screamed controlled rather than honest. The receptionist barely looked up when we entered. "Do you have an appointment?" I smiled tightly. "He'll want to see us. Tell him it's Rowan McLeod and Isla Fraser." She blinked at that, just for a second, before picking up the phone. Less than a minute later, the door to Wexley's private office opened. "Send them in," he said, already turning his back. He stood by the window when we entered, hands clasped behind his back like some theatrical villain. "I was wondering when you'd come knocking," he said without turning around. "Though I must say I expected you to be a bit more discreet." I didn't answer. Isla closed the door behind us with a soft click. "You've seen the will," I said. "The real one?" "I have," he said, finally facing us. His expression was calm, but there was a flicker behind his eyes, something tight and tired. "I found it missing." Just as I suspected I would. Very clever, Rowan. Though I always assumed it would be Isla who uncovered it first. His eyes shifted to her, but Isla held his gaze with steely silence. "We know everything," I said. The accounts, the research fraud, the video. Wexley's smile didn't falter. "Do you now?" I stepped forward and placed the flash drive on his desk. "Your name is all over it. You kept him in place with threats. You exploited both daughters. And now, all of it's on this." For the first time, Wexley looked down, not at the drive, but at his hands. "When Malcolm started to pull away, I warned him," he said softly. He was always brilliant, but like most brilliant men, he believed he could outmaneuver guilt. He looked up again. Do you think the world will care about this? A few missing grant funds? A forged signature here? A misallocated sum there? The university will deny. The donors will forget. And both of you, he leaned forward, his voice dropping, will be buried beneath the narrative I craft. Isla stepped up beside me. Try it, she said. Her voice was flat. Not a threat, a promise. We're not here to beg or warn you. We're here to give you a choice. I nodded. You disappear. Publicly retire. No press. No sudden statements, just fade. And if I don't? Then this, I said, tapping the flash drive, becomes tomorrow's headline. Wexley chuckled, but it sounded hollow. You think you're in control now. That's sweet. But you haven't read the full file, have you? I narrowed my eyes. What are you talking about? There's another copy, he said. Somewhere you'll never reach. One that includes your name, Rowan. I froze. What? Wexley stood slowly, savoring the moment. You worked for your father's department, even filed some of those reimbursements. You were part of the system, even if you didn't know it. Think anyone will believe you were innocent? Isla stepped forward sharply. She didn't know. But that won't matter, Wexley said. Not once the media gets a hold of it. The room was heavy with silence. He thought he'd won, until Isla said, then burn us both. But you burn too. Harder, longer, and louder. Wexley blinked. She smiled. My father wasn't just protecting you. He was watching you. Every document you forged, he backed it up. He didn't trust you either. I picked up the flash drive again and turned toward the door. This is the last time we talk. You have 48 hours to disappear, or the story goes public. Every file, every detail, with your name in bold. Wexley didn't respond. We left him there, behind his sleek desk in his glass tower, watching his reflection darken against the fog outside. Back in Isla's flat, we sat in silence. No tea this time, no soft music or comfort, just the knowledge that we'd stood in the lion's den and made him blink. What if he doesn't back down? She asked eventually. Then we go nuclear. She nodded, as if she'd already made peace with it. We didn't win, not yet, but the power had shifted, and for the first time in our lives, it wasn't in a man's hands. The next morning I woke to silence. No headlines, no police at the door, no sudden confessions. Just fog outside my window and the hum of Isla's kettle in the next room. He hasn't moved, she said when I entered the kitchen. No announcements, no resignation, nothing on the university's internal newsfeed. He's waiting, I replied. Or he's digging. We spent the day combing through the rest of the flash drive, hungry for anything Wexley might have meant when he threatened me. We found financial statements, ghost author contracts, even scanned pages of letters that reeked of hush-money deals. But nothing with my name. Until Isla opened a folder labeled McLeod-R. It contained a single PDF. She clicked, and my face stared back at me from a staff photo, one I barely remembered taking. At the top of the page, Research Assistant Reimbursement Report, Fiscal Year 2019. Below, dozens of entries I'd submitted while working part-time for my father's department. Books ordered, expenses filed, travel receipts for conferences I never attended, because I'd trusted him to handle the forms. I'd signed where he told me, entered the data he provided. My name was on every document, in ink, digitally, authenticated. I felt cold. I didn't know, I said. My voice sounded hollow, far away. Isla didn't speak. I didn't know, Isla. I didn't realize he was using me as a cover. I believe you, she said quietly. But that's not the point. I looked at her, heart pounding. What do you mean? The point is, he built his defense around you, not to protect you, to use you. I shook my head. Number, that's not possible. He said I was his heir, his legacy. She gave a sad smile. Exactly. You were the shield. We sat in silence for a long time. Then I stood. I need to go back, I said. To the archive room. The one he referenced in the hidden will. File 9B Isla hesitated, then nodded. I'll come with you. No, I said. I need to do this alone. She didn't argue. She just placed the original journal into my hands. In case you need to remind yourself who he really was. The university library was nearly empty by early evening. I signed in at the archives desk with a calmness I didn't feel. A young intern handed me gloves and led me into the temperature-controlled back room, then left me alone among shelves lined with quiet history. I found box 9B near the bottom row. It was old, heavy. Inside were dozens of folders, each labeled with typewritten titles. But one stood out, handwritten in familiar black ink. The Fraser Contingency. I opened it. Inside, letters from my father to the university's provost. Legal drafts naming Isla's mother, Helena, as a liability to the institution's reputation. Notes on discrediting Isla's scholarship applications before she ever knew she'd applied. Even a rejected grant with a falsified reviewer comment. Lacks academic discipline and moral stability. It wasn't just about silencing Isla. He tried to erase her. And the worst part? I saw my name again on a letter of recommendation my father had written to deny her entry into the university 4 years ago. From me. Except I had never written it. He'd forged it. My hands trembled as I read the signature. Perfectly mimicked. Digitally signed. Sent from an old department email I no longer had access to. I dropped the folder. I couldn't breathe. I walked back through the city in a daze. Fog drifted through the alleys like a memory I couldn't shake. The streets blurred. I reached Isla's flat, still clutching the folder. She opened the door, saw my face, and said nothing. I handed her the file. She read silently. Then she looked up at me. And for the first time, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Distance. I didn't know, I whispered. I swear to you, Isla, I didn't know. She closed the folder. I believe you, she said, but I don't think I can forgive him. I nodded. Neither could I. That night we didn't talk. We sat on opposite sides of the room while the wind scratched at the windows, and the truth pressed in like a weight. I had been the weapon. She had been the target. And our father had orchestrated it all. We waited 2 more days. No headlines, no statement from Wexley, no resignation from the university. Just silence, the kind that rots. On the morning of the 3rd day, Isla placed the flash drive, the journal, the documents, and the forged files into a canvas satchel. She slid it across the table to me like it was an offering. You still want to go public? She asked. Yes, she nodded. Then we'd do it together. The office of the Edinburgh Observer wasn't glamorous. A converted townhouse with peeling paint, and an overworked editor named Callum Fraser. No relation. But he listened. He read. And by the end of our meeting, he looked visibly shaken. You're going to start a war with the university, he said. No, I replied. They already started it. We're just refusing to stay quiet. He agreed to publish, not just an article, a full exposé, with evidence, with names, and with our voices, recorded and transcribed in our own words. We gave him everything, the will, the forged letters, the financial trail, even the final video of my father, unraveling. It went live 48 hours later. The aftermath was swift. Graham Wexley resigned for health reasons. A quiet press release, no fanfare. His profile was scrubbed from the university site within hours. The faculty scrambled to distance themselves. Some claimed ignorance, others denied everything. But too many signatures were on too many documents. A special review board was formed. Donors pulled funding. And somewhere along the line, a new headline appeared: Daughters of Silence. Two women uncover a university's darkest secret. I hated the title, but I loved the truth. Weeks passed. Isla reopened her workshop. I returned to my apartment above the bookshop, though it felt different now, like a new chapter I hadn't quite started. One afternoon, I received a package with no return address. Inside, a single page from my father's journal, torn and handwritten. In the end, silence is not protection. It is a cage we build ourselves. I didn't cry, but I didn't throw it away either. On a cold Friday in March, I stood beside Isla in Greyfriars Cemetery again. This time, no funeral. Just us. We stood before the grave of the man who had tried to shape us both. One through affection withheld, the other through denial. Isla placed a copy of the exposé at the base of the headstone. "Guess what, Malcolm?" she said softly. "You don't get the last word." We didn't say goodbye. We turned and walked away, side by side, into the fog, and into something that finally felt like our story.